This is the third day, the morning session of Nepal, the second international dignified menstruation. And then we have 3 panelists today, and then this is very important session that is menstrual dignity of political interest. There has been great discussion about the dignified menstruation all over the world, and in South Asia, the menstruation has been key problem within the family, within the community, within the country of an individuals, girls and women. So in this session, I would like to welcome 3 important panelists, Dr. Bimala Rai Paudel, Dr. Helen Connolly, and Gagan Thapa. I would like to introduce the panelists of today. Dr. Bimala Rai Paudel is a member of the National Assembly, Federal Parliament of Nepal, earlier a member of the National Planning Commission. She holds PhD in Development Studies from Institute of Social Studies, The Hague, Netherlands, and MA from University of Massachusetts, Manchester. Dr. Rai Paudel is a policy expert with more than 25 years experience in the areas of sustainable development, peace and reconstruction, agrarian differentiation, rural livelihoods and social protection, gender equity and social inclusion, mainstreaming, natural resources, governance, climate-smart agriculture, and disaster risk reduction. She also serves as an adjunct professor of development studies for agriculture and forest university. She is one of the members of high-level task team in organic agriculture and management board of Kathmandu Forestry College. And then other panelist of today's session is Honorable Gagan Thapa. He's a Nepali politician and youth leader who served as the Minister of Health and Population of Nepal from 2016 to 2017. He is currently serving as a Member of Parliament in House of the Representative Nepal from Kathmandu since 2008, and is currently of its Parliamentary Committee on Education and Health. He is Central Committee member of Nepali Congress Party. He is young global leader of the World Economic Forum. He has social science and science background, master's in sociology and bachelor's in science. Similarly, our very important panelist from abroad, Australia, Helen Connolly, who took up an appointment as South Australian First Commissioner for Children and Young People in April 2017. Helen has 30 years of experience as a leader in human service. Prior to her appointment as Commissioner for Child and Young People, she was Executive Director of the Australian Red Cross in South Australia and Chair of the South Australian Council of the Social Science Incorporated, Chair of the South Australian Council of Social Science, and she has been working and advocating for the building respectful partnership with Aboriginal group of Islanders peoples and community organizers, and has established network and relationship through her position of co-chair of the Reconciliation in South Australia. I would like to welcome you all 3 panelists in these sessions. We will be basically focusing on the menstrual issues. I would like to ask all 3 panelists that the menstrual discrimination, taboos, stigma and restrictions are not considered as a form of gender-based violence and violation of human rights act, locally and globally. Why is it so? So could you please reflect on your geographical context and the personal professional perspective and give 3 minutes for each so that we would like to hear from you the other answers. Thank you. Shall I request Honorable Gagan Thapa to answer this issue?
Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. Uh, I grew up in a joint family in Kathmandu. I remember those days when I was kid. I used to see my mom following the restrictions, or I would rather say a form of semi-isolation for 5 days a month. So we were told that this is a very natural biological process, and this is a norm that all, particularly woman in a Hindu family, has to follow. If my mom, or for that matter any woman who is in this period, violate the restrictions, our deity, our Bhagavan, will be angry. So this was a kind of norm. So it happens for years. Later on, my sister, as we were in joint family, my cousin, two sisters, they started to oppose it. And then, but it was a bit tactical. They won't tell that they are in going through this. They are in period. So yes, at that time, my parents, they didn't oppose that, but they didn't allow them to tell this in, I mean, with other family members that I'm going through this, but I'm not following the restrictions. So that was a kind of, I mean, they didn't accept it, but also kind of they allow my sisters. Then it all changed after a new woman entered into our family. That is my wife. So we changed that. We changed everything. Then my parents also accepted it. Then I started to recall why, even after knowing that this is a normal biological process, but discriminating a woman on basis of this is a violation of her right. But why didn't I challenge this for years? Then my conclusion in my own context was that I accepted that was as a very social norm, and then we often tend to accept it as a very private affairs. It as we never saw that from that dignity angle because nobody was confronting it. My mother never confronted that because that was what we felt. Of course, I now think that she never felt empowered to confront that. I can now understand while raising my two young girls that how will they feel if they are told to follow these restrictions, to accept that I'm impure for 4 or 5 days a month. How will they, how would they feel? So now I can relate it to those days. But when I was a kid, I think that we were told that this and this, and then nobody was confronting. It was never discussed in media. We sometimes used to read about some this rituals and practices in far west, but now I can see that. So it's everywhere. It's in urban areas, but it's not only in Nepal. I believe that it's in other part of the world as well. So I think this for two reasons. One, nobody confronts it. Second is it is, I mean, the other form of gender-based violence becomes so visible. And if you are a public person, then you tend not to fall into that. But this is never considered as a form of violence because it's so private. You don't have to tell that. You don't have to tell to anyone. You don't have to show it, and people won't observe it whether you do follow the restrictions or not. So I think we never discussed from this angle within household. We never discussed this in our schools, in communities. To tell you very frankly, we never discussed this within political parties or workshops. So that is how we all took it as a norm. So it's a norm. It's a social norm. Nobody confronting it. Everyone accepting it. Everyone is fine with it. So this is how it is perceived. Unfortunately, I think this is the reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Papa. I would like to ask the same question to Dr. Helen Colony to reflect her experience.
Thank you, and good afternoon from Adelaide, South Australia. 3 minutes on such a big topic I think could be my greatest challenge of the day, but I will see how I go. I guess in terms of a geographical... Oh, terrible feedback. I think others might need to mute. Anyway, I'll keep going. So the context in which I operate is probably really important for you to understand. So I'm a statutory officer. My position was established under the Children and Young People's Oversight and Advocacy Bodies Act 2016 in South Australia, which means as an officer I report directly to the Parliament. So in that sense, the issues that I raise do have some level of political input. So my work is guided by the UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child, and my purpose is to create systemic change and to promote and to protect children's rights and their development. So when I think about this topic, it clearly for me, like as has been said, it is a human rights issue, and particularly in my work, it's a children's rights issues. So when I address my advocacy, which involves making submissions, influencing decisions, advising leaders and ministers, and trying to actually influence the process of policy development in this state. I'm coming from the premise that the issues that children face are not about individual failings or their own issues. They are in fact public policy and state issues. Then there's an obligation on the state to actually rectify them. So my interest in this particular area started in 2019, which I'm quite a newcomer, I guess, at one level, in that I was looking to children and young people to ask them about their experiences of poverty. And I wrote a pretty significant report in 2019. And one of the things that really surprised me was the number of young women who actually raised the issue of period poverty as being something that impacted on their life. I decided that in 2020 I would, I guess, investigate this somewhat and have run 2 large-scale surveys during the course of the year where 3,500 9 to 22-year-olds, women and girls in particular, have told me about the issues that period poverty, period product access and periods generally have on their life. And it might be, I think it's often surprising when people think to somewhere like South Australia that these issues would be quite as prevalent as they are. So we had about a quarter of our respondents saying they had problems getting period products when they needed them, and that when they didn't have them, they needed to resort to things like cloths and socks and torn sheets and the like. But what I think was really interesting was as we drilled down into the other areas of the survey, we found that very few girls had any information at all about what to expect about their period before they got it. And most of them were in primary school and felt that their primary schools were also not well equipped to deal with the issue of periods. Many of them talked about missing school often every month, and some of them for quite extended periods. We had many, or more than half, talking about the lack of participation in sport and other recreational activities when they had their period. We had, I guess, the bullying and teasing and stigma at school. We had issues about toilet access, which girls talked about uniforms and fear about light-coloured uniforms. So when we ended up actually analysing all of these results, what we found was, in fact, this was more than about period product access. This was actually discrimination, this was stigma, this was taboo, this was about lack of opportunity, it was about not being able to participate in the things that everyone else can. So it became quite firmly a child rights issue. It is about discrimination, it's about, and importantly, one of the things that they talked about was that nobody was having the conversations in their private lives in their school lives and certainly not in their community lives. So, so when I reflect on, is this a political issue? Absolutely, it should be a political issue when there are groups of citizens who are not able to access the full opportunities of citizenship. Then I think it does become political. I guess the same reasons as why hasn't it been an issue. It is, I think, largely because it is still seen very much as a women's issue. It is a private issue for so long and therefore has been hidden and not challenged. I think it's also still quite an uncomfortable issue to speak about publicly. I don't think men in particular want to talk about the conversation, but in some recent work we've been done about trying to gather stories from women, it also seems to be that women themselves are not overly comfortable to talk about it. And I think the main reason is it's seen as peripheral to, I guess, the economic development agenda. So from my context, I think that's the kind of lay of the land.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. And then I would like to ask the same question to Dr. Bimala Rai Paudel.
Namaste. Namaste everyone who is connected here through Zoom and who are around here. Thank you, Moderator, for asking this very important question. You have asked us to reflect, actually, our personal life. The first day also, that my first menstruation was at the age of 12, when in my village, all the women, all the girls had to stay 3 weeks out of home without seeing the sun, without touching their brothers and father, without even looking at their faces during those 3 weeks. We were not allowed to go to gardens, we were not allowed to actually come out of the room, but we had to take shower every day, and for that we had to go out in the night. So this is the context in which I grew up. I was at the class of 8th grade in school, and I missed a lot of classes during those periods. I admire and I give credit to my mom, who never went to school, but she asked me to go to school after 7 days of my isolation. And in my village, people used to say that when you are in period, you cannot touch your pen, your books, and your copies, because Goddess Saraswati will be very unhappy when you touch these things. We were taught like that. But my mom said, well, daughter, I don't know if Goddess Saraswati will be unhappy or whoever will be unhappy, but I know that if you don't go to school and miss so many classes, then I will be unhappy. And Goddess Saraswati will be very, very upset if you fail. So that was my mother's courage that empowered me from the beginning. I went to school, and believe me, I was, class first throughout my school days, and I didn't fail because of the menstrual restriction, and Goddess Saraswati was very happy and has been very happy till now. So that was the level of confidence that my mom gave from the very early age. Later on days, when I got so many exposures in education, in professional field, and then I got married to a man, a sociologist, fortunately, and at home I got an environment where I didn't have to follow these restrictions. It's also because I married to intercaste. But when I entered to my professional life, let me first tell you how I felt disempowered during this menstruation period. At the age of, I think it was 16, my brother was 2 years older than me, and we were told that I should not touch my brothers, I shouldn't go to my prayers room, puja room, during those period. And we used to fight a lot, my brother and myself, because we were 2 years apart, you know. We used to fight a lot. So when I had period, what my brother did, he just beat me, hit me, and then ran away and went to the puja room and started touching the goddess there. And he said, now I hit you, but you can't hit me because you are menstruating and I'm touching the god, you see. That was the moment when I felt very, very disempowered. And that was the moment when I knew that how menstruation disempower a girl. I emphasize disempowers a girl. And when a girl disempowers, then whole women are disempowered. So that was the moment when I realized that we should break these taboos, and then my professional life allowed me to work. Now, I want to, link these issues to the development agenda. When I started working, I saw that a girl misses around 60 days of her school in a year just because she's menstruating and she doesn't have appropriate facilities in school. When a woman cannot enter to temple or any other auspicious spaces, so-called very important public places, just because she is menstruating, isn't it a development issue? When a woman has to isolate herself, she has to work a lot actually. It's not about not working. She has to work during this menstruation period as well. During that period when she needs nutritious food and rest, she has to work, but she cannot enter to kitchen and cannot enter to eat properly. Then isn't it a development issue? Isn't it a violation of human rights? Isn't it a violation of women's rights? So all these questions came when I started working in development field. And later on, when I started
We can't hear.
linking myself to politics, then I realized without politics more responsible and accountable, you cannot have development. So, if it is a development issue, if it is a human rights issue, if it is a women's issue, if it is a political issue, then what about politicians? Politicians need to understand this issue. And that's why it has to become political agenda. Last time also we discussed, and I started arguing, and now everyone we argue, show us one politician who is not born without menstruation, who has born without menstruation. Show us one politician, even men, even women. We all are born because women menstruate. And when we all are born because women menstruate, how can it be impure? And how can it be, excluding all women and girls from study, from social respect, from, having good hygiene, good food? How come? So these are all the issues that came up, and now, for me, I believe that this has to be a political issue. This has to be a political agenda. So that's my reflection.
Thank you. Discourses, basically political leaders, academians, and other people talk and highlight on the dignified menstruation. However, in everyday practice, social stigma, taboo are deeply rooted and practiced within the household, in the community, and then within the household of the political leaders and the people who really would teach about it should be dignified menstruation issues while in the classes, while in the public discourses, but when it comes to the family life, and then we can see so many paradoxes. What are the reasons for such paradoxes in our community? I would like to ask this issue to Honorable Gagan Thapa.
Thank you. I will put the people, as you have mentioned, from different groups into two different categories. The first, I would say, it's a form of hypocrisy. I see a lot of political leaders, not only political leaders, other public personalities, people from academia, people from media, with high public profile who who used to speak so eloquently about equality against gender-based violence, discrimination. We can see their, them on several platforms, speeches, writings. So they are considered to be a people who understand these issues and who take this issue very seriously. But when we go deep into and see their practices within their household, they are not the one who only remain silent, but they are the one who make sure that the women in their family are following it seriously. So they are the one, in fact, in reality, they are the perpetrators. So the question is, how have been they surviving this double standard? Again, the answer from my perspective is, it is so considered as a private affair. Nobody sees you doing this in your household. Nobody asks you questions. Nobody confronts you. So you can live this two different life, or you can have this two different set of belief, one in public life, one in your private life. So I think this is the first. Second, I would put, let me put in this way that so many people don't want to come out of their comfort zone. As I shared you in the very first question about my own personal experience, for a long time, even after, when I went to university, so I went to college, I was a student leader. I'll tell you very frankly. So I was a student of science. So so there was no point that I didn't understand. So it was a very, it is a very common biological thing. And as MP Bimala, I just mentioned that nobody burns if woman doesn't menstruate. But still, I hesitate to question in my family because I wasn't so, I didn't want to take the risk to come out of the comfort zone because nobody was confronting it. Because there was my grandfather and grandmother. We lived in a joint family, so everyone was okay with it. I was a bit uncomfortable, but I didn't dare to come out and ask the question: why this discrimination? Why this practice in my house? So I think a lot of people, a lot of politicians, so they don't want to break this, their comfort zone. And again, the thing is again, because you don't have that pressure, because you don't have that public pressure. Again, the reason is same. So you can feel uncomfortable, but there is no pressure for you to come out and ask the question. If let's say, if you physically abuse your wife, a sister, if you follow this form of domestic violence, you have a kind of fear that you have to face it, publicly, or you accept that this is a form of violence, and I don't want to do it. But on one hand, you haven't realized it from the very core of heart that this is a form of violence. We accept it as a norm. So you don't beat your wife. So you don't do physically abuse so a lot of things, but you do it. But you don't accept that you are abusing, you are discriminating. So this is also a form of violence. This is a form of abuse. So I think this is another reason. And the last point I would like to make here is that even in the development discourse, it's not only a development discourse. I personally used to attend a lot of this kind of workshops or seminars or events regarding gender-based violence or gender issues. But uh, for me, this is my very first time I'm attending a conference, a particular workshop on dignified menstruation. So I think we talk so less about it. Forget about the development discourse. Even this is a peripheral issue regarding gender-based violence or gender equality. Particularly in our context, it's so sidelined. We fail to connect it with I mean, economic issues. I mean, we talk about prosperity, but we never, we talk about equality, we talk about education, we talk about a number of things. But I mean, so less we used to connect this with, I mean, that's dignified menstruation is a human right issue. This, as MP Rai mentioned about how is this connected with our whole, I mean, our development process. We so less discuss about it even in public forums. That's why when we go back to our home, we and see that my grandmother is practicing it, my wife is practicing it, and everyone is so comfortable with it. So why should I come out and break this barrier? So I think this is how a lot of politicians, particularly male politicians, we feel this way. And then that's why, even though we sometimes talk about it, we are not practicing it in our household. That is what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Thapa. So highlighting the paradoxes, and then we are the agents of change. And then, so I would like to ask the same question to Dr. Bimala Rai regarding this issue. Why are there paradoxes that same people say one thing and do other things?
Thank you. Honorable Gagan Thapa has already answered very nicely. I think I can only, add on that. There is a paradox, but politicians, development workers, the experts, they are not, they haven't come from another world. They are product of this society. And when they grew up, they saw their mom, they saw their daughters, doing the same practice, and they saw their grandfather, their father, accepting it. So that was the training that they have received. Why I wonder now is, again, questioning the politicians, again. Because, I have seen so many women politicians who tell us that, today I got menstruation, so my husband is cooking, my brother is cooking, my son is cooking, or for 4 days I'm out, all those stigma following by women politicians who are educated, who can make laws, who can do oversight of the government, who can represent so many people's voice, but they are themselves following it very, normally, is it like this is a normal practice. And for me, politicians should become a role model for change. This is what I believe in. But we are not able to do that. So from the part of women, as well as from the part of men, I don't know why this, the male politicians still do not have courage to tell their wives, tell their daughters, tell their, sisters that, hey, you don't need to follow these practices now. Earlier we didn't understand it, but now we understand this is a natural process. Menstrual blood cannot be impure because it gives birth to a child. So this courage, this reflection, self-reflection has never come up. Gender-based violence issues. Nowadays, this, the gender-based violence issues is gaining a momentum in every part of the world. Still, we are having a lot of trouble to deal with it, but still, this issue has become more political. And MP Gagan Thapa already said, within the gender-based violence issues, menstrual talk is very, very rare. Very, very rare. This is because people still consider this as a personal and private issues. But how can this issue become a personal issue when it disempowers so many girls and so many children and so many women? How can this issue be a personal issue when this has become an issue of isolation for women? So it cannot be a personal issue, but we still treat it as a personal issue, and that is the main reason. We raised a lot of comments, and a lot of demand was there, and now the government of Nepal at least has criminalized the discrimination associated with menstrual cycle, So that is one of the good steps that we have taken, and this shows us that even the politicians and government has become more, reflective and accountable. But at least to change it from the home, from family, from society, all people needs to start reflecting themselves. And they need to be committed to change from their own. So women, what we call is, in Nepal we have a system called Chaupadi, where women are kept, in some parts of Nepal, women are kept in isolation in different huts. For us, this Chau system is not only in a space, but it's here. And when you start changing this, then only this issue becomes human rights issue, women's issue, development issue, and politicians will be interested to do that. So,
thank you. The Chau system. I'm not quite sure whether such type of paradoxes is there in Australia, but we would like to hear from Helen, how is the situation? Is there some sort of paradox, and what is the role of political leaders in this? Dr. Helen?
Thank you. Sometimes you're breaking in and out, both of you, on the microphone, so it can be a bit tricky to hear, but I think it's been really interesting to listen to both the previous speakers and to reflect on, I guess, some of the differences here in where I am in South Australia, in particularly around the cultural taboos and the cultural practices of periods, which are seen to be far more well known and culturally accepted than perhaps here in South Australia or Australia, where these things are incredibly private and do come down to almost individual family responses. So, so awareness of the issue may not be the issue. We, I think, struggle, our paradox here is perhaps related to people, it is so private that in fact the scale of the issue isn't really understood. So it is seen to be very peripheral and not a mainstream issue. And I guess when it comes to the pressure for policy and political leaders, there wouldn't seem to be the pressure from the population to do anything about this. So that's part of the reason I think that we failed to create laws around dignified menstruation and period poverty. I guess the other thing that strikes as really obvious is that in Australia and such our lawmaking and policy making structures have traditionally been where white male adults have been. And so I think as our structures become more representative, as we get more women involved and as we get people of different cultural backgrounds involved, then in fact hopefully we'll get better laws and better policies flowing from that. We've seen across the world, I guess, where we've had increasing number of women in really high leadership positions, that there has been less of a separation between this public and private kind of life. So we look particularly here to what New Zealand has done around, and Scotland, where they've had some really wide-scale approaches to the issue of dignified menstruation, period poverty. So I think for us, as these kind of structures change, then we should be able to reduce the paradox. But I guess at one level, all public policy is a paradox. It is always about trying to grapple with quite complex issues that rarely have simple solutions. And so it's always about a compromise of some description. So I guess for me, I would say that yes, we do have similar but different kind of issues here. for us, we need to really get a sense of the scale of the issue. We need to understand that that it is an issue not just for women. I think many of us have made this point that it has to be seen as having economic ramifications. It's about the capacity for women to participate in the workforce. I know many of the issues around being not able to attend workplaces because of issues related to periods haven't been really identified in terms of our workplace and industrial relations systems. So I guess as we move, part of the kind of solution and the responses to this issue are going to need to be bridging that public and private divide, changing some infrastructure, changing perceptions, and I guess getting to a really clear understanding of the scale of the problem that we're talking about.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions from the audiences, and then I would like to ask Honorable Gagan Thapa that you had chance to lead the Minister of Health and Populations. And then had there been any discussion regarding this issue, dignified menstruation? And second is the both Honorable Gagan Thapa and Bimala Rai, has there been any discussion on this issue in the Parliament, and what kind of participation is there? Has there been active participants from the males, or has it taken as the only females issues? Yes, Honorable Gagan Thapa.
Well, thank you. Let me put it very briefly, reflecting on my tenure as Health Minister. Three issues. One, the ministry decided to make it absolutely free for this menstrual management product, that is particularly the sanitary pads. And then that was a decision made by Health Ministry, but it took at least 1 or 2 years to realize that decision. But that was a time when we decided that it shall be included in the list of essential supplies, the free drugs list. That is one. Second, we started. We first worked on the concept of community nurse, and then I'm very happy that later on it also became a part of education law. The community nurse is supposed to be in charge of educating both boys and girls regarding number of different health issues, and also the menstrual hygiene, menstrual dignity was a part of it. And then we discussed that that the community nurse should not only be playing a role of a health professional, but also kind of educator, who will help to create a new narrative within the school, from this hygiene to dignity, from impure to pure, and also try to get more boys, discuss it among the school faculties. And then I still remember when we had a discussion with Papson and Papson, and then when we had we raised the issue that, when we talk about educating our children, so we're not just talking about giving them information. We are talking about, if we can say, creating new rebels. We will not only, read or learn about the practices, that this is this part of Nepal, we still practice this, or this is still in household, but who are, in a way, take it as a same. Let's say anyone who has completed up to class 10, if he or she consider it as a same, if there is still this practice going on in their family, can we prepare our student, to grow up like this attitude? We will take it as a same, a personal same. If he or she still practices it, if he or she still, accept it as a social norm. So this was the thing which we discussed when we talked about the concept of community nurse. And it was not only we talked about it, we in fact started it. And then later on, we put that this school it's kind of mandatory for school to have community nurse. That was, I would say, the second thing, a very specific thing about this regarding the menstrual dignity, dignified menstruation. And about this discuss in Parliament, I don't remember a specific day or session where we had a discussion on this. Yes, there was a few motions on gender-based violence. It was led by women MPs, but I remember I took part. I mean, probably in this tenure we had some 2 or 3 discussions in lower house, and then I took part in all 3 discussions. But to tell you very frankly, in one discussion I remember there were some 25 women MPs, and we were just 2 male MPs. None of the MPs who has this profile, who are very known to speak or take some hardcore political issue, none of them participated. They were, I still remember that, they were there, present in the parliament. They were there, but they didn't take part. They didn't take part. Otherwise, if there was some other hardcore political issues, they wouldn't have missed it. So, I mean, the issue was on gender-based violence. The issue with one was about this witch hunt, one was about this large, I mean, all issues regarding gender-based violence, but there were very few, to tell you very frankly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Bimar, how is your experience on it? In the parliament, in the public discourses?
I'm rather positive on this aspect. The issue of discrimination and violation of women's rights related to menstruation has been raised several times. But the reflection was more concentrated on specific part of Nepal where these ill practices have killed many adolescents and women. So this was a type of, like South system, for example. The women MPs were very, very vocal, even male MPs were very, very vocal. But we were so reactive that whenever a girl die, then the parliament, raises these issues. But then again, slowly it goes down. And again, another incident comes in, and then we raise this issue. So this is what has happened in the parliament, one. But having said that, there are a number of initiatives have been done. For example, I just salute to all women MPs. I was not there in the parliament that time. All the women MPs who were very vocal during the constitution drafting, and that enabled, a specific provisions of reproductive health rights given to women as a specific women rights in constitution. So in our constitution, reproductive health related rights is given to women, and this is one of the areas where women MPs were very, very happy. Similarly, there is a law where the discrimination related to menstruation are considered as a crime, and this was also possible because the member of parliament raised this issue in the parliament and asked the government to make a specific law on that. Distribution of sanitary pads for all girls in school was also one of the issues where women MPs were very vocal demanding with the government, and government has made it that all schools will have free access to sanitary pads for girls. These are, some of the initiatives that have been taken. As Honorable Gagan Thapa already mentioned, there was a specific motion in lower house. I was in the upper house, but in lower house there was a specific motion tabled by Honorable Binda Pandey, specifically related to South system and discrimination against women, So these are some of the issues, but these are not sufficient, that I should say. These are not sufficient. I still remember when Honorable Thapa was leading Ministry of Health, there were a number of good initiatives made in reproductive health of women and in making access to health facilities better in remote areas. But still, the issue of menstruation and menstrual related talk is not common in parliament as and in the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Issue came the death of the women in western part of Nepal. We destroyed the Chaugat, but we haven't been able to destroy the issue in our own mind. That's why the destroying Chaugat would not be enough to see the change in these issues. Dr. Helen Colony, how is the situation there in Australia? Do you see any changes or what sorts of issues are there in political arena, in the parliament? Or policy discussion, policy changes? Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hopeful as well of some changes. We've certainly seen this year our female MPs have drafted some legislation to get access to products in all schools. So that, while it hasn't gone through, it has certainly placed the issue firmly on the political agenda, and so that now has the capacity to be for the public to get behind it. There's also a parliamentary petition out at the moment which is asking them to look at it, so they need 5,000, I think 10,000 signatures to get that re-looked at. I think our education department in South Australia has been piloting a program in schools to see about the impact that it will have, and then from that hopefully there'll be some policy rolled out. But I think really interestingly as well, the business community has started to really get behind the issue of period poverty and dignified menstruation. And so they've been addressing issues and really getting behind education programs, I guess, through their channels. And we've also seen quite an interesting development of social enterprises in this area, particularly in South Australia, where we are seeing those who are supplying products, but also supplying, I guess, support for parents, education, community education, also taking up a bit of the mantle on spreading, I guess, the knowledge and understanding in the community of the scale of the issue. So I think that with it coming from multiple sources, from community, from business, from the political arm, and then also through the work that I'm doing when I finally get to write up my current report on our survey, I think we should hopefully see a bit more of a groundswell of activity that really will raise it higher on the agenda. And I'm confident that we'll end up in a place where we'll have legislation that will address the issue. I think what we know is that a siloed response to this issue won't get us anywhere. So we've been really focused on building a broad coalition of support to raise the issue onto a public agenda. So I'm hopeful. And then I think we will see ripples. I'm not sure what happens in other states and territories other than, I know Queensland has made an election promise to have product available throughout its schools. Victoria, another state, this year also has given access to products in schools as well. So I think if we build it, that hopefully within a few years we should have some pretty consistent national and state approaches to the issue.
Thank you. So we, from this discussion, we came in an idea that there had been a couple of changes from the past, but there are still so many issues to be done from policy level. So how can we improve the state policy for breaking the taboos like gender-based violence during the menstruation, and then mobility from kitchen to parliament, sexuality education for adolescents? What is your view, and what can you contribute as a political leaders of Nepal and abroad? I would like to ask Dr. Bimala, Honorable Bimala, regarding this issue. Yes. Policy level changes, what can be done for the betterment of these issues and every girl and woman could live with the dignified life during menstruation?
First of all, let me become a bit positive. There is one thought that the time changes. Time is very important. The time changes. So that is one thought. Sometimes I also reflect, and especially the people of my generation reflect like this. My mother, at the age of 98 now, she followed all norms, all values, all taboos, all social stigma, everything she followed related to menstruation and many others. So we are just talking about menstruation here, but there are many, many others stigma, gender-specific stigma that she followed. Me, I followed this stigma when I was young. During my early adolescent period, I followed because I was not able to raise question. I never raised question when I was young. So I followed. But when I started studying, knowing the world, reflecting myself, and especially when I became economically independent, I started raising question more proactively, and then I stopped following these things. Menstrual is not only one agenda. There are so many social stigma related to gender, discrimination, and I stopped following them, right? My daughter, because I made the environment at my family that we celebrated her first period at home. Her father brought a bouquet for her. We made a small party at home celebrating her, the stage where she is now, she can become, the reproductive age was established. So that was a kind of celebration that we made. And she doesn't know what is the social stigma related to period, because she takes menstrual as a normal cycle. See the changes. My mom, me, and my daughter. Now, if we allow time to change, I still believe that time will change. But if we, wait for time to bring this huge change, it takes a long, long time. It takes several other years, so many years still needed to make a complete transformation. And we don't have time to wait for this long time. We can't wait, because till then, we will have so many women died, many women disempowered, and still there are so many women who economically active but cannot contribute proactively during this menstruation period. So economically also this is, harmful for country's economy. We cannot allow that. And we cannot allow this violation of human rights continue till the time makes changes. We cannot wait. And that's why state needs to have a proactive role to play. State, and not only state, all organs of state should have this role to play. As a politician and as a government, we have several roles to play. Women's rights activists are raising this issue for several years. It's us politicians who are lagging behind to act on this issue, that I said in my first day's remarks as well. We make laws, we make policies, government implements, and we monitor implementation of those policies. The issue related to menstruation have several dimensions. One dimension is awareness, letting women reflect, letting men reflect how this issue, this is a very normal, natural phenomena, but we have made this issue very big, and how this is hampering our country's economy, our women's life, our own family lives, and our own image in the world. The country of Chaupadi, I don't want to listen to that. Several women are dying because of this, and I don't want to see that. So awareness related to these different dimensions, making specific laws, related to menstrual issues, making all women, access to basic hygiene and health facilities required to address these menstrual issues. So these are several dimensions that we need to talk about, we need to act on. Similarly, one law is prepared and endorsed already, so that is a law that discrimination related to menstruation is now considered as crime, but how effectively that has been implemented and monitored. So that is also another issue we need to discuss on. So state can do a lot of things, but we need to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Young generation probably will be able to change more rapidly compared to the past. And there has been generational change, you mentioned, Dr. Right. So to make that the periods are pure, we have to give the correct knowledge to our young generation and within the family, within the community. I would like to ask the same question to Honorable Gagan Thapa. How can we improve the state policy for breaking the taboos like gender-based violence, mobility from kitchen to the parliament, sexuality education for adolescents, and the like?
Thank you. As we are talking about state policy, I would like to emphasize on the policy makers, the lawmakers, the other politicians. They need to get more involved and engaged. We need more events. It could be formal, informal, it could be in parliament, outside parliament, it could be within party, outside party, it could be within government, outside government. More events where we can talk openly about it, where we can reflect, where we can commit, where we can plan. But I mean, to demonstrate that, the highest level of, the political level has now accepted it, that this is no more an issue of hygiene. This is an issue of dignity. This is an issue of purity. And also accept that if, as we talk about prosperity, and half of the population is women, and almost all women has to pass this stage in their life that 5 days a month, they will be considered as impure, a second class, discriminated, abused. And without this dignity, there will be no prosperity. Dignity has to be central to the prosperity. And when you talk about dignity, without talking about dignified menstruation and just sidelining it is not going to work. So we need to change this narrative. And I would also like to put this point that we need to involve more local leaders as well. Because someone from Kathmandu or someone from center, when you talk about this dignified menstruation and all those things, people might find it difficult to relate with this concept. But if the local leaders, their ward chairs, local politicians, their mayors start to talking about it in public forums when they design their annual policies for municipality or for their village palika, and then I think there will be more space for them to relate with it, as our local leaders are talking about, and they are talking about against this discrimination, against this abuse. So more involvement and engagement of political leaders. One. Second, of course, the most important for me would be, again, education. And there should be a partnership between school and household and, parents and teachers. Education should not be only about informing the student. It has to be about empowering them. We are raising 2 girls in my house. And then we are now, trying to prepare them for this stage of life. I'm telling them about how they will face it, and all different dimensions. But what about their future partners who are being now raised in different households? And if the school cannot help them or encourage them to be a rebel and to challenge this very idea, just only empowering my girls is not going to work. It's not going to bring the result. They, at some point of life, at some stage of life, has to face it, unfortunately. So I think this is another thing which we needed. I mean, where we need to work. And the third point, and as MP Rai mentioned about this new law, so anything, any stigma, taboo, anything insensitive related to discrimination of the menstruator, it is now considered as crime as per the law. But what about the implementation? What about the execution? So I think that is on one hand, this is all, I mean, the effort for awareness and preparing the right batch. But on the other hand, we must be ruthless about implementing the very law which we have already drafted and endorsed. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Helen, how is your impression and what can be done in the political sphere to break these type of taboos?
Thank you. I agree with my panelists that I think we need a really strong policy framework, and for us that is at a whole state level. Yes, and this frame needs to address the taboos and the myths, obviously, around menstruation. It needs to have an education component, and for us it also needs a universal access to product. So I guess when I think about taking up that implementation kind of baton is we know that we can have great policy, but unless we implement well, we're not going to change terribly much. So I think what we need to do here in this state is to recognise menstrual discrimination as a gender equity issue, first and foremost, and also as an economic productivity issue. So I think if we put that on the agenda, we might start to have some open conversations. I think we also need menstrual wellbeing policies in our institutions and our workplaces that puts an onus on all of us to address the kind of discriminatory barriers that menstruation has to women's full participation in society. I think we need for us here, and part of our improved education is having some, I guess, more honest advertising as well. So we know that our advertising industry and the way that products in particular advertised presents a pretty unnatural view of menstruation. So I think that's part of it. We need primary school curriculum to better address the issues of menstruation for our girls coming through, but also to increase the comfort of all genders to have the conversations about periods. So I think for us, and then there is the access to product in schools, in all institutions, in places wherever women are. We need to ensure that they feel confident and comfortable to access product. I guess this is what young people have also told me is what's required. So I think if we were able to address those three particular strands, we would be well on the track, I guess, to having the issue recognised as a gender equity issue and for it to be permeating through all of our public policies.
Thank you. So there is diversity in terms of religion. Different religions have different kind of taboos. And there is diversity in economy, diversity in different locations. So the kind of single or blanket approach of the policy would not work for this dignified menstruation issues. So if you were allowed to develop precise policy to ensure that dignity is central to menstrual dignity, what would be your very key kind of statement or suggestion to your government or wider audiences, what can be done so that we can come into the equity society so that people would survive with dignified life? I will ask, this would be my last question to all panelists. So I would like to request the panelists to summarize the issues. How would you suggest to develop a very precise policy in this context? Shall I request Dr. Helen for this issue?
I think for me, given that my role is to promote and protect the rights of children and young people, that's where I need to start. So I think in the conversations that I've had to date, children and young people are aware of the issues and they want to break the cycle. So I would, I guess, ensure that whatever policy framing we came up with was influenced by them, allowed and really reflected and respected their right to not be discriminated against, that their right to participate in decisions that impact them, and the right to ensure that their best interests are thought of in all policy agendas relating to this. I think if we get that at the core and we really do have a rights-based approach to this kind of policy, they'll be well on the way to actually addressing it through future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Helen. Honorable Gagan Thapa. So you had, as mentioned earlier, you had chance to lead the ministry, and you are the very young, dynamic leader. People expect more from people like you. So you are also familiar about the diversity of Nepal. So what would you suggest in this context that we can do for the betterment of this dignified life during menstruation?
Well, thank you. If I am to suggest just to one specific policy, then I would be suggesting empowering girls, engaging boys. And I would focus on in schools to make it mandatory in schools where teachers has to talk about it, not only from hygiene perspective, but from the dignity perspective. It has to be taught in schools, and then from this policy perspective, from this level, anyone completing class 8 or 9, be it boy or girl, we will be expecting that, as I mentioned earlier, that they will take it as a matter of saying if they has to be, if they will be asked to practice it, any form of restrictions, any form of isolation, any form of discrimination, they will not accept it. They will take it as a matter of personal sin. As we talked about it in length, that why it is so deep rooted, because it is considered as a very personal issue. You don't have to make it public. But if you take it as if we prepare these young people to take it as a very personal thing, I will not be accepting it. This is how I am preparing my two girls. We are preparing my two girls in home. I am not going to accept it, whether some people sees it or not, whether people will comment it or not. This is my personal thing. I am not accepting it. We have to prepare this kind of young people in schools, partnering with household, partnering with community, and this is the area where local government has to step in. We have 753 local governments. Let's just imagine that our mayors will start as working as champions. We will integrate this into their local health policies, local education policies. So they will be the one who will enforce the law, which MP Rai just mentioned about. The law which has criminalized it. So we need these local champions. We need these local heroes and the local political leaders talking about taking the lead. So for me, empowering the girls, engaging the boys, partnering between schools and communities, and local leaders taking the charge would be a kind of right model to break this barrier. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Gagan Thapa. So I would like to ask same question to Honorable Bimala Rai.
First of all, I would like to say that the diversity is an asset for us. Diversity in religion, diversity in caste and ethnicity is a really asset for us, and can be asset for this menstrual related talk as well. Because in some religion, in some caste and ethnic groups, menstrual restrictions are not norms. Okay? We can make role models, we can demonstrate, taking examples of these different communities, taking them to the different cultural groups and social groups where menstrual restriction is a norm. So we can, show that, look, in this group, nothing happens if there is, if they do not follow the menstrual restriction. So how comes the same natural phenomena affects your group? You see, so you can use this diversity as an example, as a demonstration factor, preparing a champion, role models to take to different parts of Nepal itself. So diversity needs to be taken as an asset, not as a challenge. So that is one aspect. Regarding the policy, what I think is we have ACT, yes. We need a comprehensive policy addressing different needs related to menstrual restrictions. It has to be included as awareness and school education, as MP Gagan Thapa has already mentioned. It has to address the basic needs of hygiene and sanitation facilities, health facilities for women and girls. It has to address the issue related to access to justice if similar discrimination exists at home, in society, in school, everywhere. So there needs to be a comprehensive policy just addressing the menstrual related issues. It has to be multidimensional. That's my views. If I just want to make one comment related to school education. We raised these issues for several years, and then school education, school curriculum now addresses this issue. We have the menstruation related, reproductive health related topic in school education, and grade 8, 9, 10 are taught that. But 2 boys, I still remember I was in youngsters similar session, talking about women's issues, and 2 boys asked me one question, and that touched me. Those boys said, in our class, madam was teaching the menstrual cycle, and she asked all boys to go out of class because she was hesitated to talk about menstrual talk in front of boys, and she asked all boys to leave class, and she started teaching only to girls. So again, the teachers are making this issue only specific to girls and women, when we are saying this issue is of men. This issue is is for boys. This issue is for entire humanity. It's not only for women. So how are we teaching our children? So that was one issue. We have been, teaching for several years that menstruation affects to only women. But no, menstruation affects to everyone. And this is issue, economic issue, I'm telling you. This has a lot of direct and indirect cost associated with menstrual restrictions. So we need to talk about economics when we talk about menstrual talk. So it's a violation of women's rights, it's a violation of human rights, but it is violation of economic development issue, We need to talk about these issues. And when we start teaching this and talking about this to men, boys especially, the children are very important change agents. When they go home, they start questioning to mothers, they start questioning to fathers, they start questioning to sisters. They ask, why are you following this? This is a natural, cycle. And then only the change comes. Then only the change occurs at the family level. So I would, request, and I would make this policy, comprehensive policy, where men are also engaged equally and made responsible at every stage. So that is my policy-related chat. I just want to say, if I were a high-level politician, I'm not, telling me, if I were a high-ranking politician, I would urge to make a code of conduct for all political parties and all political leaders to follow related to menstrual restrictions. I would also make code of conduct for policymakers, for all bureaucrats, all senior bureaucrats, and all local government representatives related to menstrual restrictions, not to follow the menstrual restrictions. And then only people start thinking about that. And peer review is important when you talk about code of conduct. So that is my wish. Thank you.
Thank you. did not allow us more. So thank you all the panelists. And then this is the issue of all, not the issue of female, but the issue of male. If we want to make it more importantly, the dignified life within the household, within the community, this male involvement is must. Education is must, and the religious, cultural, economic, and political issues are there related to dignified menstruation. But at the same time, if we look the change over the period of time, 3 generations, the grandmother, mother, and children, daughter, then we can see a lot of changes within these 3 generations. It means we could say that we are on track. Despite of saying this, we have to do a lot for the dignified life. And then this dignified life is not only the issue of female, but the issue of the all human beings. So this, to make it, we have to have a very good knowledge, scientific knowledge about what is it and what can be done. So thank you for, giving me the opportunity to discuss this session, to lead this session. Thank you, Honorable Gagan Thapa. Thank you, Honorable Bimla Rai and Dr. Helen Colony actively participating in this session. There were so many issues written in chat box. Most of the issues are related to your talk, that the participants are appreciating your voice, your ideas, and then they are also highlighting the importance of these issues in the wider community, wider scenario. We are basically focusing on urban areas. We organize these types of activities in urban areas. But if we want to change the society, we should focus on our engagement in the rural area. We should empower the female and other political leaders and community members in the rural areas. Then we can see the change in real life. Thank you very much, all the participants who could join in this session. Thank you.